Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Manchetti.
Results have been coming in throughout the night in this year's local elections. The situation so far is bad news for both the Conservatives and Labour as voters turn away from the two main parties.
There are gains for the Lib Dems and the Greens, and it's been a good night for a number of independent candidates.
Lots of counting still to come throughout the day, but this morning the Conservatives and Labour already licking their wounds and plenty are blaming Brexit.
Elsewhere on the programme, nearly 1 million people have moved from their homes as a severe cyclone heads for the east coast of India.
The rising cost of filling up. Petrol prices increased by more than 5 pence a litre in April. That's the third monthly rise in a row.
Good morning, it's London calling in the Europa League. It's Chelsea getting a away goal in Germany and late excitement at Arsenal. They've now got a 2-goal lead over Valencia, raising hopes of an all-London final now.
With fans of Line of Duty desperate to find out who H is, we're going to interrogate the actor Martin Compston ahead of the series finale on Sunday.
And I've got on my bike to schools near Leeds, just one of the villages in the spotlight thanks to this year's Tour de Yorkshire. It's cloudy, a little bit of rain here later, and it's set to turn colder, as it will for all of us as we head into the bank holiday weekend. I'll have your full forecast here on Breakfast.
Good morning, it's Friday the 3rd of May. Let's get right up to date with the latest in this year's local elections across England, with around half of the results in so far.
It has been the biggest night of local elections since 2015, with voting taking place in 248 council areas for 6 elected mayors and at local authorities across Northern Ireland. So far, we know the Conservatives and Labour have lost both seats and seen their share of the vote fall as voters have turned their back on the two main parties.
It's been a more positive night for the Lib Dems and traditionally smaller parties such as the Greens, and a number of independent candidates have also won seats. Around half of councils have already declared their results. The rest will be coming in throughout the day.
With more on the story of the night so far, here's Jessica Parker.
To serve as member for...
Results coming in, some smiles and cheers. A hold in the battleground of Swindon for the Tories, and again in North East Lincolnshire. But elsewhere, far less favourable results. The Conservatives losing control in areas such as St Albans, Southend and Peterborough. Theresa May, polling card in hand. What does the picture mean for her?
I think we need change. I mean, I just don't think we can continue like this. I've been very clear, quite frankly. Many of my constituents have said this to me, you know, we need change. We need a change of leadership. Perhaps the time has now come for that.
These ballot boxes brought good news for Labour, where they took control of Trafford. But the party lost control of councils in Hartlepool and Wirral. A sense in some areas that it wasn't quite the night they'd hoped for.
It's not looking good. This is going to be a very difficult night for Labour. We've been out and about across the borough, and the message we are getting loud and clear is all about Brexit, and the residents are telling us they're going to make sure there's some change because of their dissatisfaction over Brexit.
So signs that it could be some of the smaller parties, like the Liberal Democrats and Greens, as well as local independents, that are on the advance. The Lib Dems gaining North Norfolk, Winchester and Cotswold District Council.
Actually feeling pretty buoyant. We're seeing a lot of our vote coming out, and the national picture, of course, is really tough for the Tories.
However, there's a way to go yet. This is a big set of local elections, and the parties are watching closely, peering into what it might mean for their wider fortunes. Here, in the wee hours, though, is this some cross-party collaboration? Or perhaps commiseration. So on it goes, verdicts being delivered, one ballot box after another. They were certainly eager to get going here. It's democracy in energetic action. And energy's what's needed, with the results of many other races yet to come. Jessica Parker, BBC News.
To make sense of these results, let's talk to our political correspondent, Chris Mason. Morning, Chris. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? These are about local issues, your local area, how this is being affected. But Brexit, the national issue, has had to make an appearance.
Yeah, morning to you, Naga. It is the elephant stalking every town hall, every count centre, it would appear, this morning. Yes, of course, there's a whole panoply of local issues that will have played significantly in particular areas, but when you step back and you look at these results so far, and as Jessica was saying, yes, it's an emerging picture, things could change throughout the course of the day, then the Conservatives and Labour have both taken a bit of a kicking, and the reactions we were hearing there from local leaders of both of the big parties is the whole issue of Brexit has played big, and the lack of clarity from both parties about where they stand. So, for instance, some Labour leaders in the north of England saying that there is insufficient clarity in terms of being pro-delivering Brexit, and that has led to them suffering in places like Barnsley and Sunderland. Conservatives struggling conversely in the south of England, with the Liberal Democrats making gains, perhaps in some seats where there's a greater desire to either see Brexit not happen at all or at least to have another referendum. There's a golden rule in politics that is so often talked about, Naga, around these parts here at Westminster, which is that divided parties don't win elections. And looking at these results so far, both the Conservatives and Labour can take a look at that maxim and realise that this morning it still holds true.
Well, Chris, while you're trying to digest, we're all trying to digest what these local elections mean. Of course, we've got the European elections at the end of the month.
We have, yeah. They are now highly likely to happen. The government didn't want them to happen, hoped to have a Brexit deal so that we'd be out of the EU and they wouldn't need to take place. It looks pretty certain now that those elections will happen. So if you're watching our coverage this morning and thinking, gosh, they're getting very excited about elections that didn't involve me because there were no elections in Scotland or Wales and in pockets of England as well, well, in all likelihood in a couple of weeks, that polling station you're used to opening up down the road will be opening up for the European elections. And I tell you what, if tonight, last night and today were all about Brexit, you can only begin to imagine how big an issue it'll be at the European elections. But hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Plenty more results to come throughout breakfast this morning, and we'll keep you posted all morning.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Chris.
Time now is 11 minutes past 6.
Now, we've been hearing around half of councils in England have now declared their local election results. The rest will be coming throughout the day.
So what do the results tell us so far? Political analyst Professor Sir John Curtis is our guide this morning in our London newsroom. Morning, John, how are you? And you've presumably been watching things unfold a bit. It's important as we start the morning this morning saying, well, where are we in the count? I mean, how far in are we? What percentage
well,
do we have?
We're only just about halfway through, but I think the important point to realise is that a lot of the councils that have yet to declare are in the more rural parts of England, the areas which the Conservatives have to defend, and where the Liberal Democrats, rather than the Labour Party, are often the challengers. And one of the things that we've noticed during the course of the night, that's just the kind of area where the Liberal Democrats do relatively well and the Conservatives do rather badly. So although the Conservative losses, substantial though they are so far, are perhaps not yet on towards the high end of the scale that we were anticipating. Certainly the Conservatives are going to come away, it looks as though by 6 o'clock tonight, with quite substantially fewer councillors than they had at 6 o'clock yesterday evening.
If you were looking for an overview of this, John, what do you see so far, the big picture?
Well, I mean, the big picture, I mean, the Conservatives going backwards wasn't a surprise. The big question we were asking ourselves really was, just how well would Labour do? Presumably, if Conservatives are doing badly, the Labour Party would make gains. Short answer, no. Whether you look at seats won or lost, or whether you look at the detailed voting figures that we've been looking at in 40 councils during the course of the night, Labour have gone backwards. So, for example, even though the seats up for grabs were yesterday were last fought over in 2015 on the day that Ed Miliband lost the general election, Labour's vote is down somewhat on average from then, and the Labour Party has got fewer seats as compared with then. So the message therefore is, yes, we knew that voters were unhappy with the way in which the Conservatives had handled Brexit, but it looks as though they are also unhappy with Labour's response to the government's position on Brexit. And that, maybe as Chris Mason was mentioning just a little while ago, remember that voters don't vote for divided parties, and both Conservative and Labour look divided. Or to put it slightly differently, rather than simply Remain voters going, we are unhappy with Labour's decision on a second referendum, or the Leave voters going, we're unhappy with the failure of the government to deliver Brexit. It just seems to be voters, period, saying a plague on both your houses.
Yes, and the direction of travel then, John, towards other parties, Lib Dems, but also, say, the Greens, the independent parties, smaller parties.
Yeah, I mean, Liberal Democrats making significant but modest gains, and their vote is up by about a couple of points as compared with last year. But remember, they were defending a very, very poor baseline. The 2015 local elections were their worst local elections ever, so some progress was inevitable. But what they'll be really happy about is that their advance, such as it is, has been strongest in places where they were challengers, particularly challengers to the Conservatives, and where they were able to convert, therefore, increased votes into increased seats. So the prospect that the Liberal Democrats are regaining some of their heartland seems to be there. But perhaps much more striking and more surprising, remarkable success of independents. We've got over 100 more independent councillors now in these results than we had just a few hours ago. And in some places, Bolsover, Ashfield, they've taken control. So again, another indication that voters are departing from the traditional party system, and they're venting their protest using independents when these are available, but also the Greens, it has to be said, perhaps helped by some of the discussion about climate change in recent weeks. Their vote on average in double figures. This is going to be one of the Greens' best performances in local elections, and they've also made gains of seats. So, I mean, again, big picture stuff. Remember the 2017 general election, one of the remarkable things about it was how Conservative and Labour got over 80% of the vote between them. It looked as though we were back to the traditional British two-party system. It has to be said now that no longer looks like being the case. And of course, we weren't even getting the challenge from the two new kids on the block, the Brexit Party and Change UK, who weren't fighting yesterday. And who knows what's going to happen in the European elections when we have the challenge from those parties to the traditional parties, as well as the challenge from the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, etc., that we saw last night.
John, thank you for that. Always good hearing your analysis. I know you've been watching things closely. You can keep up to date with the results coming in throughout the morning, including counts in Northern Ireland on BBC News Channel. A special programme from midday on BBC Two with Hugh Edwards. Always worth saying, around half of the results in so far. So it's a work in progress result.
Anyway, digest that while you find out what's happening where you are this morning. See you in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Sean. I got the big one. Hello, welcome back. You're watching Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Manchetti.
Time now, 6:31. We'll bring you all the latest news and sport in a moment.
There's lots coming up on Breakfast this morning. We're talking about petrol prices on the rise for a third consecutive month. Sean's going to take a look at why and what it could mean for you.
Later, former England international Sue Smith will be here with her predictions ahead of tomorrow's Women's FA Cup final.
We've got some dancers on the sofa, Strictly's professional dancers. They're going on tour, so we've got Karen, Oti and Pasha, who are taking a brief break from rehearsals to tell us all about it.
It's worth saying as well, television drama is on a real high at the moment. Reflecting that this morning in the programme, Emily Watson will be here talking about a new drama about to start, Chernobyl, which is very, very dramatic.
Very powerful, isn't it? Really makes you think. And also, we have Martin Compston, who plays DS Steve Arnott in Line of Duty, coming on as well. So lots to talk about.
6:32 the time now. Good morning. Here's a summary of today's main stories from BBC News. It has been the biggest night of local elections since 2015, with voting taking place in 248 council areas in England for 6 elected mayors and at local authorities across Northern Ireland.
Now, so far this morning, we've had around half of the results declared. The Conservatives and Labour have lost seats and seen their share of the vote fall. More positive picture for smaller parties. Who's going to make sense of this for us? Our political correspondent, Chris Mason, of course. Good morning, sir. Give it a go.
Yeah, so let's trot through some of the results as they are right now. As you're saying, there are plenty more still to come, so this picture could change throughout the course of the day. As things stand, Pretty tough night for Labour and the Conservatives. Let's take a look at some of the details. Conservatives, for instance, losing now more than a dozen councils, gaining just 2, losing Peterborough, where there's going to be a by-election for a parliamentary seat in just a couple of weeks, losing Basildon in Essex as well. Taking a look at Labour, yes again for them in Trafford, in Greater Manchester, but losing on the Wirral and in Hartlepool and in Bolsover. Pretty good night for some of the smaller parties, as you were saying. The Liberal Democrats, for instance, bouncing back to a degree, so gaining in Bath and North East Somerset, and in the Cotswolds, North Norfolk and in Winchester, taking control of those councils, and some big increases for Independents and the Greens as well. And the reaction so far, Naga, from local leaders within the Conservative and Labour parties, plenty of them blaming Brexit and the state of their own party's outlook on Brexit for the losses that they have suffered. Plenty more to come throughout breakfast this morning.
And we're going to be talking to, thanks very much, Chris, we're going to be talking to someone from the Labour Party, Conservative Party and the Lib Dems later this morning.
Some of those counts ongoing as we speak. Let's go to South Oxfordshire, where the count's still underway, we understand. Our reporter, Bethan Nimmo, has been there all night. Morning to you, Bethan. Just tell us what's happening. You can see the gathering behind you. How's it looking?
Yeah, it's been a long night here at the White Horse Leisure Centre. Plenty of coffee being drunk, but some bleary eyes as well. We don't expect to finish here until after 8 o'clock. Counting didn't properly get underway here until well after 2 o'clock, and there are 2 counts here, plus some unexpected results that are being checked and double checked. So that's why it is taking a little bit longer than elsewhere. But although it's been a long night, it's certainly been an interesting one. The Lib Dems and the Greens seem to be sweeping the board in the Vale of White Horse on the way to overturning a strong Conservative majority. It seems like a similar situation in South Oxfordshire as well, although we don't know yet if that will change hands. But overall, it seems to be following the national picture of bigger parties losing out to smaller ones.
Bethan, thanks for that. We will, of course, keep you updated those results coming up. We understand, as we speak, what is it, 6:35 now, about half the results in so far, so the picture gradually emerging. 6:43 is the time, so let's go back to our main story this morning. So we're around about halfway through those local election results declared so far, and there's been clear gains for the Liberal Democrats and traditional smaller parties such as the Greens.
We should get some reaction now from Liberal Democrat MP Ed Davey, who joins us now from Westminster. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is a good morning, isn't it?
It's a fantastic morning. Liberal Democrats are back in business. To put it in context, I think this is a sea change. I think voters have been desperate for a strong alternative to the Conservatives and Labour, who've made such a mess of everything the last few years. And now voters have it. They've chosen the Liberal Democrats, not just to protest, but to put their faith in us around the country, in the north against Labour, in the south against the Conservatives. This was our best night for a generation.
Came from quite a low starting point, though, didn't you?
No, well, if you look at it in context, back when Labour was taking Britain into an illegal war in Iraq and Liberal Democrats were opposing it, we got great results that year. These are better than that. When John Major's Conservative government was in meltdown, we got good results. These results look, they may be as good as then. So these are historic in terms of Liberal Democrat success and victories. So, you know, on the back of this, we think it's a real clear signal to the British people that if you want to stop Brexit, you vote Liberal Democrat.
It was your worst ever results in 2015, though, wasn't it? Let's put this into fair context.
And these are our best ever results. I mean, sorry, you're not going to depress me on this night, where we've been taking seats in councils and places that we never expected. You know, we're winning places that weren't even on our best hopeful list. This is the voters making it very clear they're rejecting the Conservatives, they're rejecting Labour, and they're backing the Liberal Democrats. And that's why I think we can say this is a sea change. Clearly, the Liberal Democrats are backing the game. That's indisputable. And as we look forward, we've got to solve the mess that our country country is in. And it is Brexit partly, but it's also the cuts to the police, the cuts to our schools. You know, our public services are in a disaster because of the Conservatives. Labour have failed because of their splits and because of their poor leadership to show an alternative. Liberal Democrats are now that alternative. If you want to stop Brexit, frankly, if you want to get our country back in the game, vote Liberal Democrat. That's the message from last night.
I'll make it clear, I'm absolutely determined not to make you depressed this morning. I'm very pleased you're in a good mood.
You won't be able to.
Good, good, good. The other independent parties have also done well, though. It does seem apparent that voters perhaps turning away from Labour and Conservative regardless. So I just wonder how the Liberal Democrats, how you're planning to convert this if and when a general election occurs.
Well, if you look at where we've made our gains, we've made them in seats that we used to hold, in parliamentary seats like Cheadle in Stockport, you know, like North Devon. But we've also made gains, and this would produce parliamentary seats in areas that we've never held before, like St Albans. So this bodes incredibly well for the Liberal Democrats at the general election, whenever it comes. So you know, that's why I'm looking so chipper. These are great results for our teams across the country who've worked hard. And let's be clear, it's not just about Brexit, it's about local democracy, where people, Liberal Democrats, have shown they want to represent people, and people have backed them for that. And I think on the back of that local success and that local leadership, that will lead to winning more parliamentary seats at the general election.
I tell you what a lot of people have told us as well. They want stability. They want to know who they are voting for. And if they're turning away from Labour and the Conservative Party, and as you say, the Lib Dems back in business, back on board, your leader's going. Vince Cable's going. Are you going to be the next leader? And you're going to be that figurehead to offer some stability?
Well, first of all, Vince has shown what a great leader he's been. I mean, these are the success of his 2-year leadership. We've got our best results in a generation, and he's produced a sea change in British politics. The great news for the Liberal Democrats is actually there's quite a few people who could lead our party, and we'll see over the next few weeks on that. But we've got to now fight the European elections, and that's why you'll hear Liberal Democrats talking about not just the success of these results, but they show that if you want to stop Brexit, you vote Liberal Democrat. That's what will be Vince's message, and it'll be the message of all the leaderships.
Are you going to attempt to replace Vince Cable as leader of the Liberal Democrats?
Listen, it's not about leadership tonight. It's about the Liberal Democrats' success across the country.
You're talking about success in the general election for the Liberal Democrats. Who's going to lead that success?
Well, that'll be decided by the Liberal Democrat membership. We're a democratic party.
Are you going to put yourself up for it?
I think there'll be a few people putting themselves forward.
Included?
Let's put it like that tonight. You're not going to draw me on that. But the good news is that on the back of Vince's success tonight, I think we can see successful European elections. There's a very interesting by-election in Brecon and Radnor, we think, if the petition to recall the Conservative MP who had problems with his expenses, if that succeeds. And so I can see huge momentum behind the Liberal Democrats now.
Okay.
And what I hope that actually transforms, forget the leadership for the moment, what I hope that transforms is into our call for a people's vote. So the British people can have a final say on Brexit and hopefully stop Brexit. And that's been the Liberal Democrat campaign. We've been consistent throughout. We've led it throughout. And look at the results in the ballot boxes last night.
So Ed Davey from the Liberal Democrats, thank you very much for talking to us on Breakfast.
Thank you.
Yes, we will be talking to all parties this morning. Worth saying as well, you can keep up to date with the results. Coming in, of course, as we speak this morning, including counts in Northern Ireland, all on the BBC News channel, and there is a special programme from midday on BBC Two with Hugh Edwards. It's a conundrum. 6:57 is the time. That means it's time to get the news, the travel and the weather where you are.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Munchetti.
Results have been coming in throughout the night in this year's local elections. The situation so far, it's bad news for both Conservatives and Labour as voters turn away from the two main parties.
There are gains for the Lib Dems and the Greens. It's been a good night for a number of independent candidates.
There is plenty more counting to come throughout the day, but so far it's been a rough old night for the Conservatives and for Labour, and plenty within those parties are blaming Brexit.
Elsewhere on the programme, nearly 1 million people are moved from their homes as a severe cyclone heads for the east coast of India.
Tipping your colleagues. More companies are asking co-workers to rate each other and give them a bonus if they do a good job.
Good morning, it's London calling in the Europa League as Chelsea get an away goal in Germany and Arsenal have a 2-goal lead over Valencia now, raising hopes of an all-London final.
Fans of Line of Duty are desperate to find out who H is. We're going to interrogate actor Martin Compston ahead of the series finale on Sunday.
And I've got on my bike to schools near Leeds, just one of the villages in the spotlight today. Stage 2 of the Tour de Yorkshire rattles through. Weather could be better. It's cloudy, there could be some rain at times, and it's turning colder, as we all will, through this bank holiday weekend. I'll have your full forecast here on Breakfast.
Good morning, it's Friday the 3rd of May. Let's bring you right up to date with the latest in this year's local elections across England, with approaching half of the results in so far.
So the main picture this morning in the biggest night of local elections since 2015. The Conservatives and Labour have both lost seats, while it's been a more positive night for the Lib Dems and the Greens, and a number of independent candidates which have also won seats.
With more on the story of the night so far, here's Jessica Parker.
To serve as member for...
Results coming in, some smiles and cheers. A hold in the battleground of Swindon for the Tories, and again in North East Lincolnshire. But elsewhere, less favourable results. The Conservatives losing control in areas such as St Albans, Southend, Broxtowe and Peterborough. Theresa May, polling card in hand. But what does the picture so far mean for her?
I think she needs to take a look at how many councillors we've lost overnight, wake up in the morning and think about how she thinks the Conservative Party needs to put its best foot forward.
These ballot boxes brought good news for Labour, where they took control of Trafford. But the party lost control of councils in Hartlepool and Bolsover. A sense in some areas that it wasn't quite the night they'd hoped for.
It's not looking good. This is going to be a very difficult night for Labour. We've been out and about across the borough, and the message we're getting loud and clear is all about Brexit, and the residents are telling us they're going to make sure there's some change because of their dissatisfaction over Brexit.
So signs that it could be some of the smaller parties, like the Liberal Democrats and Greens, as well as local independents, that are on the advance. The Lib Dems gaining areas like North Norfolk, Winchester and Cotswold District Council.
Actually feeling pretty buoyant. We're seeing a lot of our vote coming out, and the national picture, of course, is really tough for the Tories.
However, there's a way to go yet. This is a big set of local elections, and the parties are watching closely, peering into what it might mean for their wider fortunes. Here, in the wee hours, though, is this some cross-party collaboration? Or perhaps commiseration. So on it goes, verdicts being delivered, one ballot box after another. They were certainly eager to get going here. It's democracy in energetic action. And energy may well be needed. The results for plenty of other races are yet to come. Jessica Parker, BBC News.
So let's go to our political correspondent Chris Mason in Westminster for us this morning. So what we like is a big thought. Chris, what's your big thought?
Well, there's a challenge, Charlie. The big thought is that the two big parties here at Westminster, the Conservatives and Labour, have taken a kicking. That is the overall conclusion so far. Now, obviously, in individual local areas, there'll be a panoply of reasons as to why results have gone in a particular direction. But when you step back, it is hard to avoid the B word, Brexit, and then that sense of general disillusion that the political classes, if you like, were set a task, which was to deliver our withdrawal from the European Union, and that hasn't happened. And either you cheer that that hasn't happened, or you're frustrated that that hasn't happened, but ultimately it boils down to politicians not managing to keep to the promises that they set out a few years ago. And that is clearly, it would seem, reflected in these results so far, with the Conservatives and Labour going backwards at the expense of smaller parties, the likes of the Liberal Democrats, who have done very well. We heard Sir Davey, didn't we, just a few minutes ago on Breakfast, talking glowing terms about their performance, and some decent performances from independent candidates and from Greens as well, as voters look elsewhere for a place to lend their vote this time.
In just a matter of weeks, of course, more elections, the European elections this time. I mean, can we read much from this to that?
Who knows is the honest truth, but I think what we can read is that if there's a Brexit effect taking place in these elections, which it would look like there is, then I think we can imagine a magnified version of the same thing playing out in a couple of weeks in the European Parliament elections. Because remember, these European Parliament elections at the tail end of this month were simply not meant to happen. We were meant to be outside of the European Union by now. So in that sense, they are huge symbols of failure from the government's perspective, and clearly the European issue is pretty much the only issue in those elections, as opposed to the range of issues in the local elections. But I guess we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. Still plenty more results from these elections to come in the coming hours, and plenty more coverage throughout breakfast this morning.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks very much for that. As Chris says, we'll keep you up to date on all results as they come in. 11 minutes past 7. Let's bring you right up to date with the local elections situation.
Now, so far, there have been big losses for both the Conservatives and Labour Party.
We get some reaction now from Labour's Shadow Communities and Local Government Secretary Andrew Gwynne, joining us on the sofa. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
How's it gone?
Well, these have been a tough set of elections for us, and in some respects they were always going to be, given the national backdrop, and also given that these seats were last fought in 2015, when, of course, it was held on the same day as the general election, so turnout was much higher. They're also predominantly in shire districts, in areas that tend to favour the Tory party rather than the Labour Party. But having said that, and there have been some disappointing results in parts of the country, there have also been some progresses for the Labour Party, and I wouldn't want people to get the impression that it's all been doom and gloom. We've picked up seats in places like Southend and in Stevenage and in Basildon. We've got the largest Labour group on Medway Council for over 20 years. We've made progress in places like Plymouth and in Peterborough. We've picked up wards, including in what will be the parliamentary by-election as well. So we are making progress in places, but have we done well enough? We've fallen back in places.
If I may,
I mean,
we've allowed you the spin answer, where you've given us, there's a bit of good and a bit of bad.
Well, that's not spin, that's the truth.
Well, you can look at it that way, but if you're more realistic, you might think this should be a time when Labour is capitalising on what everyone says is a pretty disastrous government situation, where so many people are looking at the government thinking, what is going on? You would be expecting that this is your time, and it's not.
Well, as I say, they've been a difficult set of elections for the Labour Party.
But why is it not your time?
Well,
why are people not turning to you?
I think what I said was that there has been an overshadowing of a number of issues. Firstly, I think there's been a kind of a view of politics generally, a plague on all your houses, and so the electorate have looked in some areas for some of the smaller parties, independents. There have been lots of local issues at play here
plague
as well.
On the Lib Dems.
Well, the thing about the Lib Dems, though, and this is why I say the baseline of 2015 is really important, because, of course, they were decimated in a lot of their seats in 2015 when these seats were last up for election. They are natural Tory Lib Dem battlegrounds, and those seats have reverted to form. And yes, the Liberal Democrats have picked up seats in areas where previously they had Liberal Democrat councillors.
Why don't you just accept that Labour isn't doing something right? Labour's done something wrong. I'll tell you what, let me quote Jess Phillips, right? Jess Phillips says, she was tweeting, she says, our position on Brexit has failed. Bravery is needed. Barry Gardner, the Shadow International Development Secretary, says it's the party struggle because you can't please both Remain and Leave voters, but says there are two competing principles. We're trying to hold them in tension.
Yep.
The party is speaking with two voices. It's very difficult to communicate the policy. You are not offering a clear alternative to a very desperate government at the moment, desperately trying to push through Brexit, and a deeply unpopular government. You're not offering a clear alternative.
Well, firstly, I don't think it's a bad thing for a party that aspires to govern the nation to want to bring the nation together. And, you know, we've become a very polarised, a very divided country since the 2016 referendum. And to want to bring communities that voted for perfectly sound reasons to leave the European Union in 2016 and communities that for perfectly sound reasons voted to remain in the European Union in 2016 together in local elections was not a bad objective.
I think what Barry Gardner is trying to say here, and I'll say it again, if a party is seen to be speaking with two voices, it is very difficult to communicate the policy. There is no clear message coming from the Labour Party.
And
it's not bringing two different people together.
And it is difficult to communicate the message that we want to bring the country together. We want to reunite those communities that voted leave in some parts of the country and voted remain in the other parts of the country. And yes, in those areas where Brexit has predominated on the doorsteps, it has been very difficult to get our message through. It's been very difficult to get our message through about tackling some of the key issues on how we reinvest in our public services, and I accept that.
Can we establish, I mean, as I understand it, 80% of your membership wants to remain in the EU, but your stated policy is you want to leave. I mean, might that have something to do with the fact that your votes are disappearing? I mean, there has to be a connection between those two things, doesn't there?
Well, Brexit is far more complicated than that because...
Well, can you address that issue?
Well...
Because that's not that complicated. The 80% of the people who support your party want to do one thing, but you're going to do something else. I don't understand.
Well, let me spell it out for you. Brexit is incredibly more complicated than that. Yes, the Labour Party's membership is predominantly a pro-EU. We campaigned for Remain, voted disproportionately for Remain compared with the nation as a whole. But many of the areas that we've seen results come in for voted to leave the European Union. And what the Labour Party has sought to do is to reconcile the desire of those that wanted to remain and those that wanted to leave. And that's why we said we would put forward an alternative Brexit plan. We entered into good faith with the government into the talks to try and secure a Brexit plan. It's incredibly difficult because...
Is Labour a Remain or a Leave party? Which is it, one or the other?
Well, we voted and campaigned to remain in the European Union, but we had a referendum. And we said in the 2017 general election that we accept the result of the referendum and that we would seek to negotiate an alternative Brexit plan based on the test that Labour set out of a customs union, strong single market alignment.
You haven't answered the question. Is it a Remain or Leave party?
Well, I have answered the question in that we campaigned to remain in the European Union, but we accept the result of the referendum. You know, democracy is important, that if you ask a question and you get an answer, it might not be the answer you like, but that is democracy, and that is why we have sought to reconcile those communities, many of them that have Labour MPs representing them, that voted to leave, even though the Labour Party campaigned to remain.
Andrew Gwynne, we really appreciate you coming on the surface.
Thank you. It's been a long day.
I know, you've been up for 24 hours.
I have, yes.
We appreciate
Get some sleep.
Thank you.
Get some sleep. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to keep up to date with the results, they're still coming through, so we're only able to report what's happened so far, of course including the counts in Northern Ireland. All of that's going to be on the BBC News channel, and there is a special programme from midday on BBC Two with Hugh Edwards. Time now is 26 minutes past 7. It's time to find out what's happening where you are this morning. We'll see you soon. Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Mumchetti.
Time now, 7:30. Here's a summary of this morning's main stories from BBC News. It's been the biggest night of a local election since 2015, with voting taking place in 248 council areas in England for 6 elected mayors and at local authorities across Northern Ireland.
So far, we've had about half the results declared. The Conservatives and Labour have both lost seats and seen their share of the vote fall. It's been a much more positive night for smaller parties.
Let's get some reaction now from the Green Party co-leader, Sian, who joins us from our London newsroom. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I just wonder if you could give us your thoughts on what you're seeing so far. We're around about halfway through in terms of the total number of results announced.
Yes, we've had a very, very good night so far. We've gained a lot of new seats and, importantly, on a lot of new councils where people have never elected Greens before. And these are right across the country in places you wouldn't expect, like South Tyneside, Sunderland, places like Colchester, Folkestone, the Cotswolds, all these different places where Greens have never won before, but we've broken through onto the councils to become that new voice holding the councils to account. And we've done that through hard work, basically. Our local teams working hard for all the years since 2015 when we last contested these seats. And actually, what we haven't reached yet is our defences. The councillors we already had that we won in 2015 when we were on quite high. We'd had a Green surge up until that year. We had our best ever general election results that year. We're defending those seats, but given the results we've had so far, it looks like we're going to do really well there too. I can pretty confidently say we're going to have a record number of Greens on a record number of councils at the end of today.
So these are significant changes, that's clear. But some people, contrary to what you're saying a moment ago, will say that is only because people are looking for an alternative place to put their vote because they are disillusioned. And that is clearly one of the pictures that's coming through with the two main parties, and they're just looking for somewhere else to put their vote.
I think that explains some of the margins by which we've been winning and our overall vote share going up. But remember, these elections are held under first past the post. This is very tough for us. So we can't win seats without that year-round hard work and really focusing on winning a seat and working hard in a local area. And this the results we've got are testament to our local parties working hard in those kinds of ways. Obviously, our vote share is going up. There's a huge new concern about climate change, which is one of our core issues. It's the reason many of us joined the Green Party. But also, we've been one of the clearest voices on Brexit. We're the strongest pro-EU party currently in the European Parliament for the UK. We've got Greens elected there in 3 regions. The Lib Dems only have 1, and we're in a really strong position now going into those European elections too, which of course are proportional representation and every vote counts.
We were speaking to Davey from the Lib Dems earlier on, and they too are enjoying some degree of change of fortune, some successes. He was saying a clear signal that there is a seed change in British politics, was one of his lines, but also that if you want to stop Brexit, you vote Lib Dem. It's very straightforward.
Well, it would be very odd if the Lib Dems didn't increase their number of councillors this time. In 2015, they were on an absolute low, having just come out of that disastrous coalition, having betrayed young people and students. And so they had a very, very low number of councillors, and they almost had to make gains this time. They have made gains, credit to them for winning a few new seats. But I think it's the Greens who nobody was expecting to do well in these elections. And we've won right across the country in areas that voted Brexit, in areas that voted Remain as well. The number of people agreeing with us on all 3 of those core issues where we've proved ourselves right over the years, where we've been consistent and principled, that's what will make people vote for us more in the European elections. And I'm really looking forward to those elections now.
Sian, thank you very much for your time this morning. Sian is the co-leader of the Green Party, speaking to us this morning. Keep you up to date, of course, on the results as they come in.
You can identify the politician's party from the smile, can't you, this morning?
That's true.
7:34, other news. Really looking forward to that. Find out what's happening where you are this morning. We'll see you around 8 o'clock. Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Manchetti.
Results have been coming in throughout the night in this year's local elections. The situation so far, it's bad news for both the Conservatives and Labour as voters turn away from the 2 main parties.
There are gains for the Lib Dems and the Greens, and it's been a good night for a number of independent candidates.
Plenty more counting to come throughout the day, but so far a bruising night for both Labour and the Conservatives, and plenty are blaming the impasse over Brexit.
Elsewhere on the programme, nearly 1 million people have moved from their homes as a severe cyclone heads for the east coast of India.
The rising cost of filling up. Petrol prices increased by more than 5 pence in April. That's the second biggest rise in nearly 20 years.
Good morning, it's London calling in the Europa League as Chelsea get an away goal in Germany and excitement at Arsenal. They have a 2-goal lead over Valencia, raising hopes of an all-London final now.
Fans of Line of Duty are desperate to find out who H is. We're going to interrogate actor Mark Compston ahead of the series finale on Sunday.
And it's weather for the warmer jumpers this weekend, heading into the bank holiday weekend, but I've come to schools in Leeds ahead of the second stage of the Tour de Yorkshire. Join me for all the details here and your full weekend forecast right on breakfast.
Good morning, it's Friday the 3rd of May. Let's get you right up to date with the latest in this year's local elections across England, with approaching half of the results in so far.
Let's bring you the main picture this morning in the biggest night of local elections since 2015. The Conservatives and Labour have both lost seats, while it's been a more positive night for the Lib Dems and the Greens. A number of independent candidates have also won seats.
With more on the story of the night so far, here's Jessica Parker.
To serve as member for...
Results coming in, some smiles and cheers. A hold in the battleground of Swindon for the Tories, and again in North East Lincolnshire. But elsewhere, less favourable results. The Conservatives losing control in areas such as St Albans, Southend, Broxtowe and Peterborough. Theresa May, polling card in hand. But what does the picture so far mean for her?
I think she needs to take a look at how many councillors we've lost overnight, wake up in the morning and think about how she thinks the Conservative Party needs to put its best foot forward.
These ballot boxes brought good news for Labour, where they took control of Trafford. But the party lost control of councils in Hartlepool and Bolsover. A sense in some areas that it wasn't quite the night they'd hoped for.
It's not looking good. This is going to be a very difficult night for Labour. We've been out and about across the borough, and the message we are getting loud and clear is all about Brexit, and the residents are telling us they're going to make sure there's some change because of their dissatisfaction over Brexit.
So signs that it could be some of the smaller parties, like the Liberal Democrats and Greens, as well as local independents, that are on the advance. The Lib Dems gaining areas like North Norfolk, Winchester and Cotswold District Council.
Actually feeling pretty buoyant. We're seeing a lot of our vote coming out, and the national picture, of course, is really tough for the Tories.
However, there's a way to go yet. This is a big set of local elections, and the parties are watching closely, peering into what it might mean for their wider fortunes. Here, in the wee hours, though, is this some cross-party collaboration? Or perhaps commiseration. So on it goes, verdicts being delivered, one ballot box after another. They were certainly eager to get going here. It's democracy in energetic action. And energy may well be needed. The results for plenty of other races are yet to come. Jessica Parker, BBC News.
What we need is Chris Mason to tell us what the big picture is. Morning to you, Chris.
Yeah, morning to you, Charlie. So, as ever with local elections, a smorgasbord of different inclinations in terms of how people might have voted in particular areas with local concerns. But take one big step back and that B word, Brexit, lingers as it always does, and a frustration clearly expressed in the two big parties. Now, depending where you look, that frustration goes in different directions. So frustration perhaps from some that the Conservatives have failed to deliver their promise of delivering Brexit by the time that it was supposed to have happened. Frustration from others within Labour, and we heard that expressed there in Jessica Parker's report, either that they are too Remainy or insufficiently Remainy, depending on the inclination of a particular voter. So quite a bit of soul searching, I think, for the big political parties here at Westminster, and gains from some of the smaller parties. The Liberal Democrats making significant gains. They are definitely wearing the biggest smiles this morning. Gains to it's a smaller local level for the Greens and for independents as well.
And Chris, if you look ahead, well, it's just a couple of weeks, isn't it? We've got more elections, European elections, just round the corner. What can we take from this that may have any relevance?
Yeah, if you're watching our coverage this morning of this carnival of democracy and thinking, well, hang on a minute, it wasn't much of a carnival where I was, well, yeah, there are elections coming in a couple of weeks that'll involve the whole of the UK. So there were no local elections in Scotland or Wales, and there were patches in England where there were no local elections either. In a couple of weeks' time, there'll be polling stations, well, pretty much at the end of every street. Why? Because the government hasn't delivered on its promise of delivering Brexit, so those European Parliament elections will in all likelihood take place. And if these local elections have featured Brexit pretty prominently, then you can only begin to imagine how significant the Brexit question will be in those European Parliament elections, with the full range of perspectives being reflected in the different political parties standing, not least the likes of the Brexit Party and Change UK, not prominent players in the local elections, likely to be significant voices alongside the other parties in the European elections. So plenty more to come.
Chris, thank you very much for that. Worth saying as well, of course, those results still coming in, full coverage on the BBC News channel. So we have got up to around about half of the results from local elections in England. So far, there have been big losses for both the Conservatives and Labour.
Let's talk to someone from the Conservative Party, Deputy Chair Helen Whately, who joins us now from Westminster. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Conservative Party's been given a bit of a bloody nose, hasn't it?
Well, it's been a tough night for us, and clearly there are going to be more results coming in today, and I think we will have some difficult results there. We always knew this was going to be a tough election for us. There have been some predictions that we'd lose over 1,000 seats. I think, there are some positives that I can draw from it. For instance, we thought that we would probably lose Swindon Council. That's gone to no overall control. And North East Lincolnshire, we've managed to gain. So it went, against an expectation of it being really bad, there are some positives we can find. But overall, I think a strong message to both Conservatives and Labour that people are really frustrated about where we are with Brexit. And certainly what I heard on the doorstep is, I wanted us to leave, I voted to leave, and we haven't left yet. And that, I think, has really affected the results.
So what happens next then with the Conservative Party? How do you regroup? What's the plan? What are you being told?
Well, to me, I think that is a very strong reminder for MPs in Westminster, the importance of us getting on and coming together and leaving the European Union. I really hope that that will mean Labour will take very seriously the discussions that they're having with the Prime Minister, with the government.
Can I ask you to focus on what the Conservative Party should do? Because this is about the Conservative Party losing votes through the local elections, not about what other parties are going to do to help you with Brexit.
Well, as I said, so it's certainly what I heard when out campaigning. I'm hearing that from others as well, that one of the things that has affected the results is people overall saying, we voted to leave, but we haven't left yet. So it's overall an anger at Parliament. As a governing party, clearly that hits us hardest. So people are more likely to say it's down to the government. But actually, it's up to Parliament as a whole to come together and deliver Brexit, particularly because we're operating as a minority government. So we need other parties to work with us. And we can't have Labour MPs, for instance, continuing to block Brexit. If they had supported us in the last few weeks, we would have left the European Union by now and we wouldn't be where we find ourselves.
How much influence now, then, is the Conservative Party going to have on local issues when it's just been completely rejected or significantly rejected by many of those who have voted?
So I think what you'll see in local areas is clearly Conservative councillors and activists continuing to work hard on local issues, and that's probably one thing that's been reflected in these results is if people don't want to vote for one of the main parties, no, they've really turned and looked locally just for an alternative, and it's a reminder of that happening. But I mean, I do think the whole election has probably been coloured by the national picture and the fact that we have this overarching issue as a country, which is Brexit.
OK, so I'll go back to a question I asked earlier. What happens next with the Conservative Party? What will you be told now from your leader, from the Cabinet, about the strategy that happens now?
So what I know is that the Prime Minister's absolute priority is to try and find a Brexit and reach a point with Brexit where there is a majority in Parliament. That is absolutely the priority. That is the #1 issue. That's the thing that's getting in the way of us doing all the other things that we want to do. My background's in healthcare. I particularly want us to be talking more about health and the NHS. But we know that's the overarching thing, is we have to move forward with Brexit. We have to deliver the referendum result, and then we can move on.
The problem is, isn't there? I mean, I wonder if you'll agree with this. The Conservative Party doesn't look stable in that sense. So you say, you know, it's not a majority in the government. It's relying on help from other parties. This week, we've seen Gavin Williamson be sacked, having lost the confidence of the Prime Minister. The Conservative Party isn't holding itself in the best light. Is that fair?
Well, I think it's a difficult time for us and for Labour. There's huge amounts of divisions in the Labour Party as well. And what's going on there? Well, it's a reflection of also the situation in the country, where we have this great division over Brexit and people have very strong views either side. And also the Prime Minister's leading a minority government. That's always going to be difficult. So this is playing through across our politics. But to me, I mean, the strongest possible message from voters today is that we need to come together and get on with it and do it, and actually work across party as well. Otherwise, people will continue to be disillusioned with politics. Instead, they want to see politicians listening and doing what they voted for.
How quickly can you fix the reputation, this broken reputation of the Conservative Party? How quickly can it be fixed?
I think, if we can leave the European Union, do what people voted for in the referendum, then things will move on. That, to me, feels like the biggest barrier to how people are perceiving politicians at the moment.
Helen Whately, Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
16 minutes past 8. Worth saying, you can keep up to date on those results. Still coming in throughout the morning, accounts in Northern Ireland. All the results on the BBC News channel, and a reminder, a special programme from midday on BBC Two with Hugh Edwards.
8:27. Find out what's happening where you are this morning. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Charlie State and Naga Manchetti.
Time is 8:31. Let's bring you up to date with the latest in this year's local elections across England, with approaching half of the results in so far.
Let's bring you the main picture. It's the biggest night of local elections since 2015, and the Conservatives and Labour Party both have lost seats, while it's been a more positive night for the Lib Dems and the Greens, and a number of independent candidates too. Let's make sense of these results with our political correspondent, Chris Mason. OK, Brexit. Is that it?
It's not all of what is it, if you like, Naga, but it seems to be a big part of it in terms of dissecting what has happened so far. Plenty more results to come throughout the day from the local elections in England, and a full set of local elections in Northern Ireland as well this time. But yeah, frustration about the Brexit impasse seems to be a big driving motivator in putting people off Labour and the Conservatives, and depending on the inclination of any particular voter, either frustration to deliver Brexit or a failure to stop Brexit. Let's have a quick canter around the country in terms of results. Conservatives losing in Peterborough. There's a crucial by-election there taking place in a few weeks' time. In Basildon in Essex as well, but gaining in Walsall. Quick look at Labour, gaining in Trafford, in Greater Manchester, but losing on the Wirral, in Hartlepool and in Bolsover as well. Some significant gains for the Liberal Democrats in Bath and North East Somerset, in the Cotswolds, in North Norfolk and in Winchester, and some gains too for the Greens and the Independents. Crucially though, as I say, plenty more results to come throughout the day, and then there is those European Parliament elections involving the whole of the UK taking place in a couple of weeks' time.
OK, Chris, thanks very much for taking us through that.
Yes, worth saying, of course, those results still coming in. More news on that across the day on the BBC News channel. That's it from us. Of course, programme back tomorrow from 6.
Have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.